The Cramlington, Bedlington and Seaton Valley Local Area Council, Tuesday 22nd of February 2022. I'll start with item 1 on the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair, everyone's here.
That's great, thank you very much. Item 2 is procedure at planning meetings. As usual, I'll start with the first couple of lines on this and the rest will be covered by the planning chair when we reach those items. So, just to say that the meeting is being held in a COVID-safe environment and available to view on live stream through YouTube at Northumberland TV. Members are asked to keep microphones on mute unless speaking. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held 19th of January as circulated. And can we confirm those as a true record, please? They are substantial. Are we okay with those? Okay, thank you very much. I'll sign them later on. Item 4, disclosure of members' interests. Do we have any disclosures? Okay. Now, I need to disclose on one of the planning items, I have a prejudicial interest as I'll be speaking as a member on that item. When we do get to that, I'll move to the back of the room where speakers normally speak. And once I've said what I need to say, I'll take no further part in that item until we progress to the next item on the agenda. Okay? So with that, we'll move to item 5, determination of planning applications, and I'll pass over to the planning chair, Councillor Vilcek.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so we've got 2 applications to consider this month, and as always, for every application that will be introduced, I'll check that members have had the opportunity to read the application, and then we'll be informed of any updates or changes to the recommendations that are in the report, and the planning officer will then present that report. We'll then move on to public speaking, and the objectors and the local member or parish council and the applicant and or supporter will each have 5 minutes to speak. We'll then go on to members' questions to the planning officers, and then once we've exhausted those questions, we'll then move on to the debate, which will follow a proposal and seconder for the application to be approved or not to be approved. Once the debate's finished, we'll move on to a vote, and that will be the end of that particular planning application. So we'll move on to the application 21/03574/VARYCO, and this is the variation of condition 16 delivery times on approved planning application in order to alter the time of deliveries to the M&S store Marks and Spencer's in Cramlington, Northumberland. So just wanted to check that members have received the documents, and you also should have received a video. Thank you. So we're going to hear from the planning officer about this application.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application relates to Marks and Spencer's in Cramlington. Obviously, the store is already operational, up and running, and has been for quite a considerable number of years now. The delivery times, operational times that at the moment as set are from 6:30 in the morning until 9. That's Monday to Saturday, 9 at night, and then 8:30 in the morning until 7 at night on Sundays and bank holidays, and that is for collections, deliveries and waste removal. The application is to bring that forward on Mondays to Saturdays from 5 AM in the morning till 9 at night, and on Sundays and bank holidays from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. So Monday to Saturday, that's an earlier time of by 1.5 hours, and on Sundays and bank holidays it's an earlier time of 2 hours. So this is the plans here, just to, so I probably assume everybody knows where it is regardless, but this is it on the hatched area here, and the food store shown there. And again, just the location plan of where it is in Cramlington. A shot of the front of the food hall and the rear of the property. So with the application, a noise report was submitted. Now the noise report assessed the proposal against nighttime noise levels, and nighttime noise levels run from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. And in carrying out the survey, the predicted noise levels of collections, deliveries and waste removal were all taken into account when balanced against any noise implication, and that includes what comes with those movements, such as doors closing, van doors opening and closing, crates being lowered at the rear of wagons, etc. And the conclusion was that there would be no impact to the nearest residents during those nighttime hours. And our own public protection team have considered that noise report and they haven't objected to it. They're quite happy with the change in times. I mean, it probably should be noted that they have been operating with these times for quite a while now, and that was permissible by the government under the COVID period, just to try and keep businesses moving. They were flexible with some of these construction hours on building sites and operational hours. So they have been working, open and using these times earlier than what they've had permission for a number of months now without any objections. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission for the extended hours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move on to public speaking. There's no objectors, but we do have the elected member for the division, Councillor Swinburne, who's going to speak. Councillor Swinburne, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The application made is supported by very detailed technical and professional documentation, no doubt expected of a large corporate organisation that people will probably be familiar with from a company of this size and scale. There are references throughout to policies for sustainable development, growth in employment and the economy, ensuring a vital and vibrant town centre, strategies, design, amenities, principle, sustainability, etc., all common in these types of reports. What it fails to mention is our council's values from the corporate plan. Top of that list is residents first. And this comes back to why we as members are here. That is the people who elected us to represent them. It's these residents that contact me to complain about noise after hours and before hours from the town centre retail area. These residents that have shown up at town council meetings asking for help with the noise from the town centre. These residents that have also shown some flexibility during the pandemic. And these residents that live not just around the town centre, but on every road that leads into the town centre, the roads that are lined with residential properties. You see, these residents don't have access to corporate planning organisations or large companies or solicitors to act on their behalf. They rely on us, their local representatives with local knowledge, to speak up for them. The attached substantial noise survey supplied by the applicant is around 30 pages and contains a significant amount of detail. However, it fails to acknowledge the properties at either side of the site in question, one of which is a new development of sheltered housing for the elderly. It also refers to National Planning Policy Framework, NPPF, July 2021, quoting paragraph 185. Planning policies and decisions should also ensure that new development is appropriate for its location, taking into account the likely effects of pollution on health, living conditions and the natural environment, as well as the potential sensitivity of the site or the wider area to impacts that could arise from the development, etc., etc. The information they quote and rely on for this application is incorrect. This is not a new development. This is an existing business, and therefore the policy used in the noise survey is inappropriate. The business has enjoyed a relaxation in regulations due to the COVID pandemic, and residents have been prepared to give flexibility. This cannot now become normal practice. Nearby residents and those living on the surrounding routes that feed the town centre should not have to be disturbed for deliveries at 5 AM each morning. Nothing earlier than 6 AM should be permitted. Since the store opened some years ago, even more development has taken place along these routes. People don't want to be woken up with the sound of HGVs driving past their houses, delivering earlier and earlier, or as stated in the report, during a nighttime period. This should not be allowed to take place and begin to set a precedence to which then becomes the norm. Some of you will already know that noise carries during the night hours. I know from my own experience when staying elsewhere and have been rudely awoken by the sound of commercial rubbish being emptied some streets away at 5 AM. When raising my concerns, the owners were unfortunately already well aware of this but their response was that the council approved it. Don't let that happen here just to fit in with a corporate timetable. Stick with our council's values and put our residents first. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got no supporters speaking on the application, so we'll move on to questions, members' questions for the planning officer. Councillor Flux.
Thank you, Chair. It says 39 residents were notified. Now, I'm just looking at my Google Maps, and it's arguable which houses are closer. There's places to the north where Councillor Swinburne has alluded to, where there's a new development of sheltered housing, although that's not occupied yet. And there's housing to the west on Beacon Hill Estate. Is there any indication of which residents have been notified?
We're notified of the actual application.
39 residents were notified.
Yeah, I mean, I could give you that information. It's just I would have to dip out of this system and go into another system to find that out. I mean, I could do it, but it would just take me a minute to look that up.
It would be useful to me, because it'd be useful to know where these notifications have come to.
Yeah, I think Adam is just, he can look at that screen now while I'm
Thank
busy
you
with
very
this
much,
presentation,
thank
so
you.
he'll get that information for you.
Does any other members have any questions whilst we're waiting? I'll just give the planning officer a minute. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Judith, you said the company had been operating these hours for some time. Exactly how long? Has it been since the start of COVID, or?
I believe it was from about April 2020.
So a considerable thing.
Yeah, when the government's, allowed a little bit of flexibility.
Do you know if we've had any complaints?
Marks and Spencers have said that they've had no complaints, and our public protection have had no complaints either.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, can I just follow up on what Councillor Robinson was saying? Has there been any complaints direct to the local town council?
Not that I'm aware of. There may have been, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, just one final one. This sheltered accommodation we're talking about, I presume it's the one on the roundabout? That's a considerable distance away from here, isn't it? If it was across the road in this residential estate, I would understand it maybe, but the one on the roundabout's quite a distance away from here, isn't it?
Chair, I've got, I do have a map here of everybody that was indicates everyone that was consulted. So it's all the dwellings to the west of the site, and so right over the road, and the first row of houses to the west of the site, they've all been notified. The ones to the south, they don't appear to have been notified. But all the developments to the north, which is again is more retail, but certainly the developments all to the west have all been notified, all the houses.
So, Chair, just to confirm, that's kind of like Lockrick Avenue, just over the railway line. It's not gone to the streets beginning with M or to the new development.
Yeah, I think that's correct, Chair.
Thank you for clarifying that too.
Does any other member have any questions? Councillor Bullman.
Can I ask why there are trees missing near the bridge. My understanding that trees are a barrier for sound travelling. Is that deliberate? Removing the trees near the bridge to access Beacon Hill, or is that to allocate the bridge being there? Because my understanding is, if I remember it correctly, the bridge is directly opposite Marks and Spencer's. Is that right?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't know anything about the tree. I don't know the reason that's come down.
Chair, it's probably inappropriate that I answer, but I'll try and answer during debate then, if that's okay.
Okay, Councillor Flux. Any other councillor have any questions? Right, well, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to motions. So is there any motions from the floor, please? Any motions? Councillor Robinson?
I'll propose it, Chair.
For the application to go ahead, yes?
Yes, in line with the officer's recommendation.
Right. Can you second that? So the motion's been proposed and seconded. So do we have any councillor that would like to start the debate? Councillor Flux.
Yeah, I thought I might, because Councillor Bowman had asked during debate, a lot of those trees were cut down when the new green bridge was installed. You may remember that was installed around 2012, 2013, following a petition of more than 600 residents after the old bridge was closed down and wasn't going to reopen. A new green bridge was put in, and at that time a lot of trees were removed. You might well note, if you ever drive past there, that there's some plantings there which hasn't matured as yet because it will take time or what have we, but that's why there's a lack of trees there. Going back to the application, I do have sympathy with what's been said. However, I haven't had any notifications from residents because it's quite close to my area. We've had one comment in. We haven't had widespread knowledge of this. I did used to live quite close to this. I did used to be able to see the McDonald's arch from outside my flat I lived in, but I don't live there quite so close now. But I would have expected that if this was a concern, I would have received significant amount of correspondence given that everyone was indoors during April, May and June, or however long it was. People would have noticed because you was indoors, you couldn't go anywhere. So I haven't had that. Whether there has been complaints from Station Road, which is just outside my patch, although the new development is in my patch. Maybe there are if vehicles are going in and out of there. But I have to say I haven't had those complaints. We've got no comments from the Town Council. We've had one letter in. I find it very difficult to justify voting against this. However, I do have every sympathy if there were occasion when it were too noisy.
Thank you. Any other member?
I would like to sort of
Councillor
agree
Dunbar.
with what Councillor Flux has said. I don't think there's any problem with retail getting some deliveries. I think it's important to keep everything going, and well, preferential to have them early in the morning than have deliveries through the day, where in some shops there's a particular one, not on that retail park, has deliveries through the day, and I think it's quite dangerous for people who are trying to shop there and using the facilities in the car park. So I think this company's doing the best it can.
Thank you. Any other member want to speak? Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do have a concern, and it is related to other premises near to Marks and Spencer's. You know what it's like if you let one have an application to do something, others will follow in the queue. I'm just wondering if the other stores in line with Marks and Spencer's, and including McDonald's on the corner, if they actually follow suit, would we get more complaints? Would we get aggravation from the local residents I do have a concern about that. Following on from that, the reason why I raised the issue about trees and it being a barrier for sound travelling across to the housing estate is a good focus, as it were. Could we lay down a condition, if this is granted, that trees will be planted there, substantial sized trees, as to mitigate the noise travelling across the railway line and onto the housing estates? Let's put it this way. The way I look at it is would you want to live on that housing estate nearby? Would you yourself, would you be feeling the detriment of HGVs coming in at very early hours in the morning and late at night? Although we've had no complaints as such, it does raise the question if more join the queue. I'm a bit perplexed with the whole argument, actually, but you can see where I'm coming from. I'm thinking as a resident, as it were. The problem I've got is that barrier of trees. If the tree line was there where the bridge is, I might take a different view. But at the moment, I'm really perplexed why that has been left as it is, barren, when it's not just the stores with their deliveries, but the road it passes, which is very busy. I think we need to have a look at that tree line and put it back into place. That's about all I've got to say on the subject. Really, it is a perplexed planning application, as it were. It really is. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bowman. I do think Councillor Flux did say that there was new trees there, if I was right. Councillor Daly, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I've lived in Cramlington since '93. Yes, there were trees there removed when the bridge was put in, and saplings have been put in which have matured, but they're not 30-year mature trees. They were put in, I think, 2012, 2013. They will grow. And I think it's also important as well to reference the fact that the housing estate between this area here, well, Marks and Spencer's, was talking about them, between M&S, there's a road, well, there's a yard, then there's a road, then there's a grass verge, then there's a dip, which is where the railway line is, which is surrounded by bushes and trees, and then there's another verge leading up to more bushes and trees. Then on the other side, there's a big park before you get to the first house. So they must have incredibly acute hearing if they can hear an HGV at that time in the morning, because I imagine we would have had an equal number of complaints about the trains which go by in the morning as well, including goods trains which use that line. So I think putting a condition on of more trees, love them, yeah, let's have them, but they are there. So that was really the point I'd like to make on that, Chair.
If I can just ask, obviously Councillor Bowman has mentioned that you'd like a condition to be placed on the permission for trees to be planted to mitigate noise. I should imagine that the planning officer is going to say that it's not reasonable or necessary for this particular application. I don't know if you want to speak about that, but obviously if Councillor Bowman did want to pursue that particular condition, obviously as the proposer, Councillor Robinson, and the seconder, Councillor Dunbar, would need to agree to that. So,
I would just like to say I don't think we need to, because it seems to me it's an excellent opportunity for the very excellent Cramlington Town Council to get involved and plant a load of little saplings in there to help with the noise reduction.
so the proposal stays as it is.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Dunbar.
I still carry on with my second proposal for this to go ahead. And as I think Councillor Flux has already said, that there are a number of saplings being planted there already. And I think there is more noise coming from the railway line rather than a delivery of bread and such like.
Would anyone else like to add to the debate? Right, so just for clarity, can we have the motion read out before we go to a vote, please?
Yeah, the recommendation is to grant planning permission as per the report suggests, subject to the conditions also listed within the report. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll go to a vote. So can we have a show of hands? All those in favour? Anyone against? And do we have any abstentions? Yep. So 9-4, the motion has been carried. So we'll go on to the next planning application, which is 21/3734/CLEXIS. And apologies, my voice is gone. So just to check, members have read the documents for this application. And we'll now hear from the planning officer.
Before we start, the recommendation has been altered, and the new recommendation is that members grant the certificate of lawfulness. The application is for a certificate of lawfulness for an existing fence at Cramlington Learning Village. And he has the site here. And as you can see with this block plan, the fence goes around the whole perimeter of the site, and the fence is 1.8 metres in height. He has some elevations of the fence and what it looks like. He has some site photos. And the reason it's here at committee is because there's been a number of public objections regarding the restriction of a public right-of-way, but it should be stressed that the fence is actually permitted development and it does not require planning permission. We therefore have no planning grounds to refuse the grant of the certificate of lawfulness. And yeah, it's permitted development and doesn't require planning permission. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. So there's no objectors, elected members or supporters for this application. So we'll move on to members' questions for the planning officer, Councillor Flux.
If this is permitted development, then why is it at a committee?
Yeah, Chair, there's been a bit of history with this one. It's caused quite a lot of, there's a lot of issues around the Cramlington Learning Village at the moment, and it's more to do with the public right of way, not the fence. The reason it's come to committee is because there has been a lot of public objection, but again, it's more about the right of way issues and the perception that the fence and gate within the fence is blocking some access to the path. But they are all out with the planning process. But the reason it's come to committee is because it was put on the chair referral list, and it was agreed that because of the opposition, it was better to have an open discussion about it in the open forum. But as Adam has said, and it's just really to make that crystal clear that it is a certificate of lawfulness, so it's not the same as a conventional planning application that normally comes to committee. And members obviously can approve or refuse it, but whichever decision you do take, it's not going to stop the fence from being there, because it is actually permitted development. So you would need a valid planning reason to refuse the grant of the certificate of lawfulness. Otherwise, you know, they can. Well, what I should say is, even if you did that, they are still entitled to leave the fence where it is because it's permitted development.
Right,
It is a little bit confusing, I suppose, but yeah, we have been asked to bring it to committee to have that discussion in the open forum.
I understand your answer, but it materially would not seem to make one iota of difference how we vote. But there we are.
I think if I can just come in, sorry, just to say, as the officers have said, it is permitted development. They can do it anyway. However, under the legislation, anyone can apply for a certificate confirming lawful development. And if an application is received, then the council's under a duty to consider it.
Understand it. So they have submitted that application of a certificate of lawfulness, and we're deciding on that. I've got you. Okay.
Did Councillor Daly want to come in?
The Flux made here.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of, and obviously I appreciate what Councillor Flux is saying, and I agree with what he's saying. In regards to the public right-of-way, now in Hartley we've had to remove a couple of kissing gates, and also one of the local farmers had to remove a speed bump from his driveway because it was part of a public right-of-way and they were all classed as obstructions. Now, whilst it might be permitted development in things, and we can give them the certificate of lawfulness one way or another, that doesn't really seem to matter. Should this not actually just be being referred to public rights of way officer in terms of the lawfulness of blocking the public right of way? Because the law states that you can't block a public right of way, and if it goes against that, then it's not so much a planning issue, it goes down that legal side and it's dealt with there rather than here.
Yeah, Chair, that's correct on what you're saying, and there is a lot of dialogue between the public right-of-way officer and the learning village. The public right-of-way officer has made it clear to the Cramlington Learning Village that they can't obstruct the footpath. It is still NCC land. And as far as I'm aware, they've been told that the gate must remain open, and the gate does remain open, as far as I'm aware. I think there have been occasions where the gates have been seen to be closed, but nobody knows who has done that. You know, we can't say for certain it's the learning village or anybody. But as far as I'm aware, the learning village are aware that the gates need to stay open. They are keeping those gates open, and they are fully aware of the consequences if they obstruct the footpath in any way. So there is still this ongoing dialogue because there is an application in to extinguish that public right of way, which is ongoing at the moment. So while that goes on, the footpath must remain unobstructed, and the gates must remain open.
Any other questions? Councillor Zulshevlin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm still not clear. If you, does this permitted development block the right of way in any way at the moment? Suppose if we allow this permitted development to go ahead, does it result in blocking the right of way, public's right of way?
It would if they closed the gates.
It would, sorry?
It would block the right of way if the gates were closed. But the rule, what they've been told, and the learning village, that they must leave the gates open. As far as I'm aware, they understand that, and they are leaving the gates open. I think if they have been closed at any point in time, it's possibly been somebody else. But the learning village are adhering to what they're being advised and told to do. That if they don't leave the gates open, yes, it would obstruct the footpath. But as I say, as far as I'm aware, they are leaving the gates open.
So my supplementary question, Chair, is that can we issue certificate of lawfulness pointing out at least, or putting a condition that they must not obstruct the public right of way? Is there any feasibility for that?
No, because the application, the certificate of lawfulness is an application just for the fence, and what it does is we issue a notification to them, a decision to them to say that what they are doing is lawful development, and it doesn't require planning permission. If it doesn't require planning permission, then we can't put any conditions on. But it would be dealt with under separate legislation anyway. If there's any sort of obstruction, it's dealt with under public right-of-way legislation.
Councillor Dunbar.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think we should just leave it as it is. Sorry, I didn't have the mic on. I was just wanting to clear up where exactly it was. And I know it is well used. I do know it is well used.
Councillor Lee.
I just want to clarify really. So that the right of way at the moment has a gate on it.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So, right,
The fence wouldn't be blocking the right of way. It's the gate
yeah. And the right of way starts here at the side and runs down here around this building, and there's a gate here with it right of way exits. So there's two gates, gates 1 and gate 6, which allow access to the right of way.
So in terms of the right of way, is the gates that are the problem, not the proposed fence? And the gates already exist?
The whole thing exists, yeah. The whole fence around the whole site, and the gates exist as well.
So can they not go ahead with the fence and take the gates down, maybe? Or?
The fence and the gate are all one. It's all the same thing. I think Adam's just going to put the photo back up. Yeah, so we're all just, it's all one in the same thing, really.
I just don't see the purpose of the gate if you're not allowed to close it.
Well, I think that's why, because there is an application in at the moment to extinguish that footpath. Maybe it's in preparation that does go ahead, but yeah, at the moment, until that order is confirmed to say that footpath can be extinguished, if that ever happens, then they do have to leave the gates open.
All right, thanks.
Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is on my ward, and as you say, it's caused a lot of issues, and residents have raised a number of questions, and they did want to, come along tonight and speak, but they weren't available, and they asked if the meeting could be changed, and I had to advise them that this wasn't the case. With regards, there was a note put on by Highways back in November, raising a couple of issues, which was subsequently changed at the beginning of February, contrary to what they'd originally put on, but the plan hasn't changed. With regards the public right-of-way, which can only be removed by the Secretary of State, who put it there in the first place. Stiles, gates and other structures on a public right-of-way are unlawful obstructions, unless they are recorded on the definitive statement as a limitation, or it can be shown that the way was dedicated with such a structure, despite not being recorded on the definitive statement. Authorisation to install a structure may only be granted in relation to footpaths or bridleways by the owner or occupier of agricultural land, or land being sought into such use makes an application to show that the structures are necessary for preventing the ingress or egress of animals. So I need to ask if the gates were part of the definitive statement on the public right-of-way 300-155, as was previously made. I am aware that the gates have been closed on a few occasions and complaints have been passed to the rights-of-way officer. They have been closed by the school. They've been closed and locked by the school during the high winds. And residents have complained that whilst there is an application in to have the right-of-way removed, they feel that they find it intimidating and bullying to have the gates there. If they're not part of the original application, then the gates should be removed and allow free access. And I'm hoping that neither the County Council nor the applicant is, furthering that to suggest that residents nor school children are animals, and applying the second part of the rights of way thing. But really, until such a decision is made on the right of way, and avoid any doubt, the gates should be removed as per the DEFRA regulations. The second part that was made by Highways is with regards to the gated access to the vehicle access. The access at the front causes significant problems without the gates being there, to the point where there's double yellow lines and curb strikes on there, which are completely ignored, and the police have had to attend because of complete gridlock. People couldn't get in or out. Highways did raise this as an issue about the gates being put there, and suggested that the gates were put after the roundabout to allow a turnaround, which would seem sensible. As it is where the gates are at the moment, if those gates are locked, the road is only 5.5 metres wide, which is the distance from the back of this room to where Councillor Dunbar is. The length of a 3-door Mini is 4 metres. if a van or commercial vehicle was to enter that roadway and have to, leave, without going into the gates, at the moment, the only way it can leave is either by reversing across a zebra crossing and reversing into the estate, which is a blind corner, or backing out onto the dual carriageway, both of which is completely unacceptable. I think the original highway suggestion of moving the gates onto the other side of the roundabout is a more sensible suggestion. Another question that was raised is rights of residents' access to council land to carry out repairs and maintenance to their own property. Under the Access to Neighbouring Land Act 1992, residents have a right of access and can only be refused by a court. As we're all aware, there's been a lot of problems with fences coming down. Residents have put up new fences. Where the new fence is now being put is immediately up against existing neighbours' fences. And if the land is closed off, then neighbours can't even get in to paint or fix their own fence. But they do have a right under the 1992 Land Act. There's many objections, as we've seen, that have been put on there. And when it does list the Human Rights Act in the report about council from acting in a manner which is incompatible with those rights, the main body of this report identifies the extent to which there is identifiable interference with these rights. There's numbers of acts of law already which does currently permit access to the land, which is being denied by residents and users at the moment. So these are the questions that have been raised and unanswered to this point, which is why residents have been complaining and had no response from the council, and it is council land. Another of which, now this is going to affect all members here, because I can guarantee that everyone has this. There are currently gardens around the property that have gated access to the council land. If this is fenced off, you've got the scenario where people cannot then access from their back garden onto the right of way, and these have been there for many, many years. If you're now to say that these are to be removed and fenced across, that's setting a precedent, and I think we then have to follow that through and go back to every resident across Northumberland who has gated access from their side garden, back garden or wherever to council land, and do the same to them as well. And that's going to cause absolute uproar, because you can't say to some residents who've had that for 20 years that they can't have it and the rest of the residents in Northumberland can have it. So we need to give consideration to that as well. These are the questions that residents have been raised and have not had responses to, other than it's permitted development, so they can do it, they can put the fence there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Do you have any answers to those questions, Officer?
Well, there was a lot there. I mean, I think the earlier part of what you were saying there, DEFRA regs, all of that, we would need to take that up with the Public Rights of Way officer. I think there's a lot in there that you said that we will have to take back to the Rights of Way officer to see what his comments would be. Because a lot of, I mean, it does, when you say, you're told that the fence is permitted development, it's not just sort of a get-out clause. It's the fact, it's under the planning regs and legislation that this fence is permitted development, and it does take away a lot, all our powers to do anything when that's the case. It's the same as somebody is building a rear extension on the house that is going to overlook the neighbour, but it falls under permitted development. We might look at that and think that's going to be awful. If we had a say in that, we might not allow it. But when it's permitted development, there's very little that we can do. I mean, when you were talking about the moving the gates to the other side of a roundabout, I'm just wondering if the vehicular obstructions that you've referred to, if that in any way has been generated by this fence, or if that was happening regardless. Because if it is, obviously that's another issue, that if it's not being created by this fence being erected, then that is something separate that we'd have to look at with our highways team. And in terms of the neighbouring fences and maintenance and access, again, if this needed planning permission, we would be able to go to the applicant and say, look, can you just move it 5 metres that way to give these people more access? Because it's permitted development, that takes away our right to do it. We could ask them, and they might, would be relying on their goodwill to do that. But if they said, no, we're not, it's staying where it is, there would be nothing we could do. Again, it becomes a civil matter between the parties involved. And I know that might sound like a bit of a brush off, but it really isn't. It's just the way the legislation is and the way planning law falls. I've tried to address, I think, some of the things as much as I could there. If there's anything else that you think I haven't addressed, obviously just feel free to ask again and I'll see if I can answer it.
If I could just come back on the vehicle access. There's been major vehicle problems around the site, some of which tried to address or work on a few years ago, but unfortunately we could get no engagement with the high school. But with putting the gates there, this is something new. If somebody was to access, that road and the gates were closed, and it wasn't to access the school, or they had no right of access, the only way they could leave is by either turning around, and it's an extremely narrow road, or by having to reverse, because there's no other way. There's no roundabout to turn around. This is something new, and it's a very narrow road. There's a lay-by there, but vehicles park in the lay-by, and part of the access to that lay-by is now being removed because of where they've put the gates. So it's either trying to turn around, but as I say, it's very narrow, or having to reverse, and that's either having to reverse into a residential estate, which is a blind corner, which is extremely dangerous, or reverse back out onto the dual carriageway, which is just, that's a ridiculous situation. Both of which is avoidable by moving the gates onto the other side of the roundabout. Thanks.
And Chair, could I just ask, is that when the gates are closed that problem arises? Yeah, again, it comes back to the point that those gates shouldn't be closed. And if they are, then that's something, again, that the Public Rights of Way team can pick up with the Cramlington Learning Village.
If I could just say, I think the idea of the school fencing off and putting the gates there is what they're calling safeguarding. So if they're not closing the gates, why are they putting them there? Thanks.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. The fence is there now, Judith.
Yes, that's correct.
Did they ask for permission to put it up, or did they just put it up under permitted development?
They submitted a pre-application inquiry to us to ask whether it would need planning permission or not, and we advised them, based on what they had submitted, it wouldn't need planning permission, but they might want to submit a certificate of lawfulness to get that document to say this is lawful development.
Yeah, and did they give any reason at all why they wanted to put the fence up?
It's just the safeguarding issue.
So they want to safeguard the children in that school?
As far as I'm aware, to be honest, it's not really our reason to ask why they want to do it. We're just looking at it as to whether it needs permission or not. As far as I'm aware, it was just more to do with children safeguarding.
Yeah. Fine, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Lee?
Just one quick one. With the certificate of lawfulness, it says here, where is it? It does not remove the need to comply with any other legal requirements. So I would assume the public right-of-way legislation is then needing to be applied on top of that. But so we're just giving them a certificate to say they're allowed to build the fence, but they would still have to adhere to the public right-of-way policies.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? So do we have any motions from the floor, please? Councillor Flux?
I'll move approval in line with the recommendation, which has just recently changed.
And do we have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson had his hand up. Yeah. Okay, then, so the motion's been proposed and seconded. So does anyone want to start the debate? Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I think if the certificate of lawfulness is to say that within planning law this is lawful, then we accept that, move on, and let the public rights of way officer, highways, etc., deal with it. I understand the frustration of people living around there, and I don't believe that the public right of way should be blocked. The gate should be removed, as I've alluded to. We've had a farmer in my area who had to remove a speed bump because it was apparently blocking the right of way, and that had been there for many, many years and preventing people speeding through his property. I think we just accept that this is lawful under planning. There are issues with it that need to be dealt with outside of this meeting, and we move on with our evening.
Councillor Robinson?
More or less exactly what I was going to say. It seems we've got a certificate of lawful development to consider, and it seems to tick all the boxes on that. There's the red herring of the public right of way, which the appropriate officers are dealing with that in a legal issue, which isn't our place to deal with. So it seems to me we've only got one conclusion tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Chair. In the questions we had up front, someone asked the question, it was Councillor Flux, well, why are we bringing this to panel if we've got no power to determine? And that's kind of set me down a different route of this, because I was thinking we should go out and have a look. But actually, if they're allowed to put this up, they're allowed to put it up. The issue, I think, which has been alluded to, is the fact that you've said that they're, I think you said, that they're putting in an application to close the right of way. That is probably, then brings us on to what Councillor Swinburne said about the problems when a gate is closed, about the commensurate impact that that's having on the people in that area. So that seems to be really the debate which we may or may not have some influence on. But the history of this goes back to when the high school was converted. So this is all historic. It converted to an academy in 2012. Its 2015 Ofsted report, because I know this because obviously I was cabinet member Children's Services, indicated the fact that the school has a large, complex and open site. If this was a school being built from scratch, like we are building across the county, we would never build a school which is open for people to walk through willy-nilly. We just wouldn't. So we're dealing with a open site with different, because it isn't really clear, I think, from the map there, it's not a single unit school. It is lots of modular buildings dotted around a very large area where young people walk between in order to access sixth form or the junior learning or the senior learning village. That large canopy you see if you go past it is just one part of the network of buildings. So in essence, I get what the school's doing. It's trying to adhere to what Ofsted have said, which is you have a large, complex and open site and it is a risk. To any other school in Northumberland, Holt Whistle First School, I visited there, they had a similar thing. They had literally a walkway between two buildings, which was gated and fenced. It was like walking through a visiting zoo at times, it felt like. But apart from that, new builds don't have this. So this is historic, and we're having to deal with something which is historic. The problem for me is that I can't see whichever way I vote here is going to make an impact to that fence. What I think is important is that we engage with residents about this rights of way, because people have been, I've walked through there, people walk through there, they cycle through there. Now, whether or not that is a safeguarding issue, I will leave that for people to determine in the rights of way debate whenever we have that, or if we have that. But I think Councillor Swinburne's point is right, that clearly the closing of that gate causes issues, and that needs to be reflected as we go forward. And I am concerned, if it is correct, that people who back onto the field may or may not be contravening the law in terms of having back fences, because I'll take you round anywhere in Cramlington and that is commonplace. People put fences, gates at the back of their fences to access public land. And if we're going to stop it for one, we'll have to stop it for all. And you know, good luck to any officer who tries to do that or elected member who votes for that one through. So I can't find a reason to object to this because effectively I have no power. But I do think that we need a very clear, robust debate on that rights of way access, because that, I think, is probably the concern to local people. And I totally understand safeguarding at the school as well. And it is evidenced in their Ofsted report. So unfortunately, we're a toothless tiger in this case, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dunbar.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the problem with this and how it's arisen is all of Cramlington used to be fields, a lot of fields. And there's a public rights of way going through them. And when they put the developments in, the estates, the new estates, they had to have the rights of way, so they did. Why this is a problem now is because a few years ago, and I can't remember exactly when, that the school or the county sold some of that land off for housing. And the people where they've got the fences backing onto the school football pitches, the pitches, is the small estate, not Barnes Park, it's the other one that is, yes, and that was put there, they built the houses. And since those houses have been built, there's been nothing with problems between the people who live in the houses and the people like from the school and where the school is run. And I think a little while ago, I was there for some tournament, a football tournament, there was people complaining that the school was having a tournament with football from football clubs all over, and the people from those houses were complaining that the balls were hitting their fences. So the school can't do right for doing wrong. Now they're going to put a fence up which will stop the balls from hitting the fence. And there's an access point. But I think, going back to my original point, the whole reason that this is such a sorry mess is because in a previous government years ago sold off a lot of school playing fields for housing. And this is the cause of the problem. And I'm sure the rights of way officer, I think we should just leave it and let them sort it out, and I'll probably go through this all over again and again and again.
Thank you. Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. I can't support this going through. The plan that was submitted clearly shows gates across the public right-of-way. And to approve that is approving something which is unlawful. The certificate that was put in shows gates across the public right-of-way, and, you know, according to DEFRA, you can't do that. So for this committee to allow that to go through and to agree to it is agreeing to something which is clearly unlawful as per the DEFRA guidelines. And if it wasn't in the original definitive statement, then this committee will be approving something which is against the law. That's how I can't agree to that. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. We're not agreeing or disagreeing about this fence, are we? Because all we're doing is agreeing or disagreeing about its lawfulness in construction. And we've heard that it was lawful in construction. So as Councillor Daly said, we're really toothless. I mean, in one hand, we agree that it was lawful, and it seems to be, to me. On the other hand, we've got this problem with people being able to access their green fields, in my view, and being stopped from doing it. And then we've got the children's safety thrown in the mix. So all we're deciding to do tonight is to say that that permitted development was in fact lawful, and we've heard from the planning officers that it was lawful. That's all. We're not asking them to take a fence down.
I think if I can just clarify, Councillor Robinson, I think you've set it out quite well there. The decision is that development, which already exists, is that fence lawful? And the reason is, in the officer's report, yes it is, because it's permitted development. Any other issues to do with rights of way, if it's in contravention of any other legislation, would be for enforcement through those separate routes, not through the planning process. Because all you're looking at today is that permitted development? Can you grant that certificate because it's permitted development? That's the question that you have.
Would anyone else like to add? Councillor Daly?
So I just want to get clarity on what's just been said there. So Councillor Swinburne made a statement that it was unlawful because for a variety of reasons. I think you've kind of addressed that, but I just want clarity over what the validity is of what Councillor Swinburne said in relation to what we're considering today.
I mean, I don't know anything about DEFRA legislation, to be honest, or anything like that. Like I say, the only remit that you have today is determining whether it's lawful under planning provisions, whether it's permitted development under the General Permitted Development Order 2015. Anything else out with that, if it contravenes any other legislation, would have to be enforced separately through a different route.
Chair, could I just add one further comment to that? The fence going across the footpath, again, in planning terms, we can grant the certificate on that basis that the gates, even if the gates are closed, it's not contravention of any planning legislation. The contravention is with the obstruction of the public right of way. So it might seem, you know, that what Councillor Swinburne is saying, yes, we can grant the certificate with those gates being closed. They can do that as far as planning is concerned. The contravention comes under other legislation. And just to note as well, there isn't a statutory obligation to consult on these types of applications. However, just because of the issues that had been raised, we did consult our Highways Department and they had no objections to the proposal. So it's just to make that point in terms of that, yes, this is lawful in planning terms, entirely gates closed or not. The contraventions come through the public right of way and obstruction of the public right of way, the footpath.
So to clarify, Councillor Swinburne, if he wanted to take action on those points he's raised, would need to do that through other means.
Yes, it would. Primarily it would be through the public right of way officer, I would say, in the first instance. That might fall to others as well, but that would be the first port of call, the public right of way officer.
Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted clarification, and I've heard the debate going on between the officers and bringing out some good points. I think that we need to bear in mind that rights of way is one thing, and that's a separate issue. But what we're actually discussing here is this fence. Is it lawful? And I look at the construction of the fence and I think to myself, yes, it is, because I am concerned as well for the safeguarding of our children on Northumberland County Council's property, whether it be a park or a school or whatever it may be. I think we do have a responsibility for safeguarding, and the school more so. As for the rights of way, I think we should leave that to the rights of way officers to discuss and to put measures in place. My primary concern is safeguarding. I can see why the school put the fence there, and at the moment it is not safeguarding our children on the site, because as the officer pointed out earlier, we're having to leave the gates open to allow access to a right of way. Let's see that the rights of way officers bring some conclusion to this and it is sensible. But at the end of the day, my main concern is of the safety of our children, and other things like Councillor Swinburne has indicated about problems with traffic. They can be altered. We can change things to accommodate that. But I honestly believe that this fence should be there for the safeguarding of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, just a quick one, 'cause I would like this wrapped up, because I feel like we've spent a long time on it. What Councillor Swinburne is saying is correct in that you can't legally block a right of way. But what we're saying is that this permitted development is legal. How is it? Is this an issue actually with the planning legislation, that because it seems strange that a permitted development would be legal if it then contravened the laws around right of way. So are you allowed to construct a permitted development that goes across a right of way?
Chair, yes, you are. It's just a question of different legislation. It's a bit like covenants on a land. We could grant planning permission to build on land, but if there's a covenant on there which prevents it, that's a separate issue that has to be addressed separately. So, although it does seem as if you know, a little bit confusing and a bit odd, the two are very different in why they can do the fence. If that in turn obstructs this public right of way, it falls under different legislation. But the two you can still go ahead with the planning side of things, and the rest's picked up under separate legislation.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Flux.
Yeah, summing up, if everyone's done.
Yeah.
I think essentially a battle's been brought to the wrong battlefield, as it were. The battle for this is at another day. It's all going to be rights of way, or whether that comes to us or where, I don't know. But the long and short is that this is a school. This is a fence. Look, you could see it at almost any school across the country. You can see this same green fence in many locations. Is it permitted development? Well, I think we've clearly defined it is. Should it have this certificate of lawfulness? Yes, I think it clearly should. We're not here to police other laws. We're not, you know, if we give permission to a factory or, you know, or a warehouse or whatever, it's not our business to ensure this committee's business to ensure what's going on inside the factory is legal or not legal. That's for someone else to decide. So I think in that respect, I don't think we've got any other option to do this, and I think the battle on this one will come on another day. There's been some interesting points raised, but they're not really for this arena. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on. So for clarity, can I have the motion read out before we go to a vote, please?
The members recommend the granting of certificate of lawfulness.
Thank you. So we'll move to the vote. So can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Anyone against? And any abstentions? There's none. Yeah. So 9-4. So the motion has been carried. So next agenda item is the appeals update. This is on pages 33 to 34 of your agenda pack, and it's just for members to note. I'm going to hand you over to our chair, Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, everyone. Do the planning officers wish to stay for the rest of the meeting? No, thank you. No. Do we want to just take a 5-minute break while the planning officers and the legal officer leaves? If anyone... Yeah. Right, we're just suspended for 5 minutes. Thank you.
I think we're ready, Chair.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome back. We'll move to item 9, which is the Local Transport Plan Programme 2022 to 2023. The report sets out details of the draft Local Transport Plan LTP programme for 22-23 for consideration and comment by the local area council prior to final approval. So, who's taking this one?
I'll take that. Thank you, Chair.
I'll pass you over to Paul Jones for that. Thank you.
Yeah, colleague Robin McCann is here to assist in answering any detailed questions as well when we get to the end. So, as the report highlights, this is the draft Local Transport Plan Programme for 22-23 financial year. We have yet to receive the actual confirmation of the LTP allocation from Department for Transport, so we based the programme on the figures that we received from them last year at just over £23.5 million, and we expect that will be the same level of funding we'll receive this year from DFT. We've had no indication to think otherwise on that at this point in time. So you'll see from the report, the programme is split across 4 key areas. It covers cycling and walking schemes, road safety schemes, highway maintenance or road maintenance, and then bridges, structures and landslips. The programme has been drawn up following a review of the maintenance needs of the highway asset, and Rob's team are heavily involved in doing this work. That includes things such as identified road safety issues, potential improvements to the highway and transport network, and it also includes the priorities that have been put forward by your good selves and the town and parish councils for consideration as well. So the programme set out in the 4 appendices in terms of the actual detail of the schemes. The 4 areas in terms of appendices A to D include, in summary, just over £1.3 million for the walking and cycling schemes, £2.1 million for the safety schemes, approximately £15.3 million for road maintenance, and £4.7 million for bridges, structures and landslips. There's a few key points to note within the paper. In terms of the walking and cycling activity, the allocations are fundamentally split between improvements to the network, so things such as crossings, footways, bus stop waiting areas, and then the rest of it's in relation to maintenance of those assets, so footways, cycleways and maintenance of the rights-of-way network. You'll also see that the LTP allocations, in addition to that, there's a £1.5 million allocation with the Council's overall draft medium-term financial plan for next financial year to look at the delivery and development of cycling and walking schemes, and that's part of the Council's local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, or LCWIPs programme. And there'll be some consultation on those coming out soon. In addition to the LCWIPs project and programme, clearly there's quite a few schemes that have been put forward by county councillors and town and parish councils that have been put forward as priorities that are actually significantly higher in terms of the costs associated with them than what the funding that's allocated would enable them to be delivered. But we have effectively logged all of those, that we will keep that record of those schemes that are being put forward by members, and we will, across the council, look at how we can look at alternative sources of funding going forward in future years to try and deliver those schemes going forward. So they're not forgotten about, they are there, and we'll continue to work on them. In terms of safety issues, the vast proportion of the activities concentrated on road safety at high-risk sites where there have been patterns of injury accidents over the past 3 years, as well as other areas of concern, both on rural and local roads. We also undertake quite a lot of traffic management activity, speed reduction schemes, and you'll see from the programme we'll also be continuing with the programme of implementing the 20 miles an hour schemes within schools, and there's a £500,000 allocation towards that. That will enable the full completion of the programme in the next financial year. And just to give some scores on the doors in terms of the 20 mile an hour schemes at schools, we've completed 107 of the schemes to date out of the 161 schools where we consider 20 mile an hour schemes are viable or possible. There's a further 10 issued for construction and 44 are in design. We're also proposing a £350,000 allocation for the refurbishment and renewal of existing signage and replenishment of road markings on a signs and lines heading. And this is an area that's regularly highlighted as a concern by both urban and rural town and parish councils and local members as well has been an area of concern. So we've put additional funding in to undertake a programme of activity on that. On the roads maintenance side, it's a wide-ranging programme. It entails maintenance schemes across the whole county. These cover activities such as resurfacing, structural patching, our big surface dressing programme over the summer, primarily on the rural road network, as well as microsurfacing schemes that are primarily undertaken in residential areas and urban areas. There's also allocations for capital repairs to carriageways, structures, drainage, car parks and traffic signals, albeit we don't have a great deal of traffic signals in the county relative to most urban areas. So this whole programme is basically developed around asset management principles. It is based on the knowledge of the highways asset. And in addition to the LTP funding, again, I'd also like to just highlight that within the council's wider medium-term financial plan, there is a further £2 million allocation proposed for a programme of activity of repairs and maintenance on UNC roads and footways across the county, and that builds on the £15 million capital allocation the county councils made in the past 2 financial years on that as well. The final area is in relation to the Bridges, Structures and Landslips programme, and this fundamentally consists of work to strengthen a number of structures which are currently shown as being under strength from our bridge assessments. And it also includes a £500,000 allocation to take forward a further phase of activity on the historic Grade 1 listed Berwick Bridge that I'm sure you're all very familiar of. Obviously not in your area, but it's a significant part of the overall programme, so highlighting it as part of that. There are a number of landslips that are proposed for repair. The one highlight, I think, within the overall programme, and again not within this local authority or local area council area, is the Todsted scheme. This is on the B6344 Weldon Bridge to Rothbury Road. It's an overall scheme that costs £9.3 million. It's been wholly funded by the county council. It will take a 2-year period to deliver that scheme. And in the current financial year coming, it's a 1.863 LTP allocation towards that, with the rest of the funding coming from the county council's own capital. This is a particularly complex scheme that we're developing. We've got geotechnical consultants supporting the county council to deliver it, and it will be going hopefully out to procurement soon, obviously subject to the council's medium-term financial plan being signed off as part of the budget setting process. So hopefully that's given you a quick overview of the programme that's been proposed. We're more than happy to receive any comments that you have in relation to that prior to it being finalised in the back end of February, so we can start on with the programme in early April. Thank you.
Thank you. Members' questions. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you as well for obviously producing the report. I do normally try and stay very positive and look for the best in things, but I do have quite a few questions on this because I do find that it's quite... There's a few things I'm a bit concerned about with this draft. I do think we should be putting more funding into cycling and walking, because I do think a lot of our issues come from the amount of cars that we have on our roads, and one of the best ways to deal with these parking issues is to put more into walking and cycling. On the back of that, I had a number of meetings with the leader and deputy leader of the council, as well as other officers. So I know you've mentioned about the local cycling and walking infrastructure plans, which are mentioned on point 22 of this report. Now, in that, there are 12 towns listed, and it was always going to be the 12 towns. Now, following the meetings I had, I think back in November, I believed it was agreed that a 13th LC whip was going to be introduced into this thing for Seaton Valley, and I've seen the plans for that, but the last couple of mentions I've heard of the LC whips, that doesn't seem to be there. Have you heard anything about that, or can you possibly look into that after the meeting to see whether that is going to be the case?
So in terms of the LC whips, as far as I'm aware at this point in time, it is the 12 main towns in the county. So that would include well, they're actually listed in there which towns it relates to, because that funding fundamentally is looking at trying to reduce the amount of local commuting in locations. So it's that less than 2 miles type journeys that we're trying to reduce, so trying to encourage people out of the car that are doing those short trips and basically back onto the feet or onto scooters or onto bicycles to do that work. So, and it's focused on those 12 main towns as a starting point. It's not the end point, but it's a starting point for that major activity across the county.
I will follow that up separately, because my understanding was that because of the Northumberland line station going in at Seaton Dalrymple, that they agreed that it would be sensible for Seaton Valley to be included in that. My next point on this is in last year's local transport plan, there was £140,000 allocated for a pedestrian safety scheme for a Puffin crossing phase 2 on Beresford Road, which isn't yet in, and I still haven't seen any designs or plans or anything for that. However, this year there's now £100,000 in for traffic management on Beresford Road. Why are we going, if, as the report says, schemes from last year that haven't been completed are still there, they're still going to go ahead. There are a lot of other areas in Seaton Sluice that need traffic management more than Beresford Road if this crossing's going in anyway. The areas like the A193 between Blythe and Seaton Sluice, where there was a £10,000 scheme to look at excess speeds on that last year, nothing seems to have carried forward from that. I've not seen any results from that, but we know that outside Seafield Mews there is desperate need for something to happen. Why, instead, if we can deliver the crossing on Beresford Road that's needed, could that £100,000 for traffic management not be allocated to the north end of Seaton Sluice, Fountainhead Bank, Seafield Mews, where it's actually needed? And as I said, I've been looking for updates on those schemes from last year, and I haven't really had a lot through. I do understand, I know you're trying to pull something together on in that the member schemes and things that we've got going on as well will add to this, which is great. But I do find that with the transport plan that there's very little in terms of resurfacing of estate roads, which is desperately needed, that we're on the original shortlist, that don't seem to have carried forward, places like Gloria Avenue and New Hartley, which is absolutely in desperate need. And there's also none of the members or parish council schemes that were put forward really for most of Seaton Valley don't seem to have carried forward into this. And some of those were, for example, there's one estate in Seaton Sluice that doesn't have a 20-mile-an-hour limit, whereas the rest of them do. It's where the community centre is, and that to me isn't something that's massively expensive. So where's all, I mean, what's happening from last year to this year, and where these things that were in the draft, like the original long list that we've seen, not carrying through?
So in terms of any scheme that's in last year's LTP, those basically, as the report highlights, will carry forward if they're not completed by the end of this financial year. I haven't checked to see where the scheme is at Beresford Road. I'll check in terms of what the existing proposal is in relation to that. It will be, just reading through that, it is looking at speed reduction measures as part of that scheme. So that's something we'll look at, and if you think there's an alternative location in that area that requires consideration, more than happily have a look at that as part of that's why we're here, to get that feedback. In terms of, is there enough put into residential road maintenance? We've got 5,000 kilometres of roads. We've got 23 and a bit £1 million. There's always going to be winners and losers, I'm afraid, and we have to do this on a highways asset management basis, and that's what we've done in terms of looking at the highway asset. Which are the roads that require the highest level of maintenance, given the current condition of them, taking into account, you know, the needs of the whole network, including those roads that have a much lower in terms of traffic volumes. But, you know, there's just not enough to go around, sadly, and we're trying to do the best we can using those asset management principles.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Who's next? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions, Paul. Are we used to getting a bit more detail in these reports, the LTP reports? I seem to remember getting it broken down almost by town, by ward, nearly. Certainly by LAC area. There's a lot of county-wide mentions and things.
We changed the format of this a couple of years ago, so it identified it more in terms of both in terms of the local area council locations on the maintenance schemes, but also in terms of the four appendices. So it was the walking and the cycling, and grouping it on that. Previously it was primarily just integrated transport block that was kind of like all of those activities in one lump. So that hasn't been fundamentally changed in this time round. It's following suit from previous years.
It looks a bit different to me. That's a couple of easy questions then. 1.5 million cycling, is that all spent now on the approved schemes?
Which bit you're referring to? The 1.5 million is in relation to the capital programme for 22-23. it's an allocation, a proposed allocation within the council's medium-term financial plan to support the delivery of the LC whips. So that's still a process where the consultation's going out to highlight where the corridors are, what potential schemes are that are coming from that. So it hasn't been allocated yet, it's pending that consultation
I just heard
exercise.
another committee that 6 schemes have been approved. No?
The schemes that are being identified as part of things such as some of the regeneration work in Blythe, for example, and that's getting, but that's, my understanding is that's coming from some of the regeneration funding rather than it's part of that wider plan.
20 mile an hour for schools. If a school's in the middle of an estate, does that make the estate 20 mile an hour?
Each one's effectively tailored to the needs of the locality. So what we have tried to do in recent years is to focus on where the actual issue is. But for some areas, it is more sensible to look at it as a zonal basis. For others, it's much better to just target the area directly in terms of the actual main route into the school itself. So it is horses for courses in terms of it's part of the assessment and the dialogue with the school.
Fair enough. The last one is, you mentioned 2 million more on the 15 million that was put into small paths and roads and whatnot. Is that available? How to access it? How to propose schemes for it?
It's still subject to going through full council. Yeah. But basically, we're going through a programme now, again, just using the same highway asset management principles, the information that we've already identified in terms of looking at what roads and the various condition of the different parts of the network and that prioritisation in terms of the road hierarchies to come forward with a draft programme. So that's something that will be, it's put forward, I think, to be agreed by the Cabinet member in consultation with the Executive Officer, so with Rob Murphy as a draft programme. That draft programme, I think, will come forward for, you know, it will be made public to your good selves, but it will be based on that asset management principles.
And just the very last one, sorry. I had agreement, certainly last year, I was told it would be in this LTP, for a crossing traffic on measure on Netherland Lane outside St Benebiscop's in Bedlington. Now, what was said was it would be mocked up and costed this year.
If you want to pass me the details, I'll look into that.
I will
It's
do.
not something that is in the back of my mind, but I'll look into it.
So is that a formal crossing point at Netherton Lane?
Yes, it's because the amount, it's the exit for the school now, and obviously the amount of children and traffic that's going out of there, it's not good to mix the two. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Bowman and then Councillor Flux.
Thank you, Chair. Can I have clarification on page 56, where it says various countrywide, including Hollywood Village, Phase 1, Croft Ward, Home Zone area. What breakdown is Hollywood Village in that? Is you've got the price saying at 50,000. The last time I looked at it, it was 60,000. Have you been able to reduce the price, or are you reducing the project?
The allocation of the 50,000 is across that urban and road safety issues for those schemes, so it includes both Holywell Village and Phase 1 Croft Ward Home Zone area. Phase 1 in the Croft Ward Home Zone will be a feasibility study, so the majority of the funding will be allocated to the Holywell Village one, which I think is actually more looking at delivery rather than design. Yeah.
Councillor Flux?
Yeah, it's specifically about one item on here, which is Crowhall Lane. I notice it says, just a background, the southern section of Crowhall Lane is in Cramlington West Division, and the northern section is the boundary between Cramlington North and Cramlington West, but would probably more residents in Cramlington North would care about it than Cramlington West, to be perfectly honest. It says it's a 40 mile an hour scheme there. Now, firstly, can I check, is it a 40 mile an hour scheme? Because we've always wanted a 30 mile an hour scheme there. And I don't understand why it would make any difference in cost to be reduced to 40 to 30. And secondly, can I confirm that this covers the entire stretch, i.e. does it cover from the roundabout near where we saw our planning application earlier, where the new care home is, all the way up to West Hertford Fire Station, so there's another roundabout in the middle of that, because that would seem logical to me, and I don't see how it would increase costs by doing that, but any clarity on that would be useful.
I'll need to come back to you in terms of the section length, and I'll check that and come back to you on that. But in terms of, is it a 30 or is it a 40? It is a 40, and that's based on the highway engineer's review of the scheme and also DFT guidance, and taking into account the DFT requirements as to where you can put in a 40-mile-an-hour scheme versus a 30-mile-an-hour scheme. It's about the amount of built development along the road, the nature of the usage of the road as well. So we have to follow that DFT guidance in terms of what's appropriate for the setting.
Okay, and is that taken into account the 480 new houses that have just been built beside it, and the new arrangements which will come in, well, hopefully soon, but we've been waiting for goodness knows how long, in terms of the developers at this site who have been, there's been some dalliance on a section 278 agreement. There will be a crossing there, allegedly. There will be a roundabout there. There will be dual carriageway in part of it. Has that all been accounted for in terms of that review?
It has, yeah.
Just as a point of order, Chair, the signage there currently says 30 miles an hour. It's all the way up, and it was put there by the County Council. So that's not what we've been working on, and that's not what we asked for. So, and it is subject, Neil Snowden's done quite a bit of work, so that one I think needs looking at, because
more than happily pull the scheme, have a look at the scheme and share the
our
details
highways
of the
team
scheme
have put
with you.
30-mile-an-hour signs up, so it's if we're talking about increasing the speed limit, that'll go down like a proverbial lead balloon.
Okay, I've got Councillor Lee and then Councillor Taylor.
Just a quick point there. Obviously, the road safety features in this. I am currently trying to access through my members scheme speed indicator signs. What I'd like to ask is, who is it that would maintain those speed indicator signs? Is that the responsibility of county?
No, the responsibility for speed indicator signs rests with the town and parish council in terms of the cost associated with those and the ongoing maintenance of them.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Right, can I ask why that is, please, and when that was decided and agreed? Because our understanding is that this is a highways piece of equipment, and I don't know when this has been an issue, you know, in our town council. We're not sure when there was an agreement that this highways equipment was then passported to town councils with the associated costs.
As far as I'm aware, with my length of time here, it's not something that's been passported. They're not recognised signs with the Department of Transport. And from everything that I know, the process has always been that we therefore don't put them forward or sponsor them, but we're happy to support the installation of them if they're then bought and maintained by parish councils or other, or they're funded by through member schemes. So that's why it's come about, certainly from my understanding. I think there might be one or two signs that historically are county council,
Right,
but the vast majority are parish council or third-party signs.
I was going to say Councillor Dale is going to back us up on this, because when we'd asked for them in Cramlington, we were told categorically that there's certain ones that we couldn't have that were not supported, and we could only have these type of signs, which were the supported ones by the county council, which was subsequently useless, and then somewhere else in Cramlington, the county put the ones in that we originally wanted. And we've been left with ones that are pointless. Councillor Daly, do you want to jump in there?
So, right, get your popcorn out. Right. If these are town council assets, which town council determine Why the hell have I got speed indicator signs on Horton Drive in Cramlington, which no way reflected what I wanted? Because I was told by the county council, you can't have the one with a smiling face, like you have in Seaton Valley. You can't have the ones that we've got outside the approach to County Hall, which have got, thank you for slowing down, you're really good. No, I've got a little circle which shows your speed. I basically have a speedometer on Horton Drive, and I've got 3 of them. And what's better, I was told by Highways I couldn't even have what your indicative speed should be on the pole where the sign is, because it's illegal. So now I know that all I need to do is go to my town clerk and say, Bob, I want signs here, I want them changing, I want that, because the county council have got naught to do with it. And that's not the truth. The fact is, these are county council prescribed assets which the town councils are actually funding the maintenance of. And we need to get to the bottom of this, because this has caused major issues in Cramlington and possibly other areas, because I will challenge anyone to drive around the county and have a look at the diversity of the speed indicator signs around our county. There is no consistency, which you could then argue as, well, that's because certain town and councils want X, Y and Z. Well, if that's the case, I want a refund of £15,000 on what I spent on speed indicators, because they're not fit for purpose. And I look forward to getting that refund, getting the ones I've got in, taken out, and then we'll have the ones that we actually want. But I think this needs clarity, because there's mixed messaging here. The messaging is county approves, county installs, county is the arbiter, and the town and parishes maintain them once in. Now, if that is not the case, I want an audit done of what's gone in, where it's gone in, why it's gone in, because clearly this is an issue which needs sorting. And as I say, for Cramlington, I know Councillor Ezel Shelvin's been involved in this as well, and others. We just need clarity on that. So that's, thank you, Chair.
And in addition to that, there's the powering of them, because we've been told we can only have solar ones, and we can't have them hardwired in, and yet we drive around the county and we see ones that are hardwired in to the street lamps. And I think it's extremely unfair that we are constantly told we can only have solar powered ones, which cost an absolute fortune to replace the panels when they get damaged or stolen, and they have been, when we see elsewhere that they're hardwired in to the mains. So, as Councillor Daly has said, we need something sorting out with this, because it's a ridiculous situation.
I think you're aware that my solar panels, not mine personally, were stolen from my signs, and the town council wouldn't replace them. And I had to fund it through the county to hardwire it. So what you're saying is that you can't get the electric that were hardwired, but you can, but you have to pay for it. And that was a chore for the town council to accept that, and I had to fund the whole lot of £5,500 just for that. And I'm quite happy with them. They work lovely, thank you.
I totally agree that there is a need for clarity. As far as I'm concerned, and anyone that has asked me the same question for the last year and a half, we do not and we should not be hardwiring these into the county council network under the circumstances that I've already explained. They're maintained by other people. As soon as you hardwire them into our network, it becomes an issue of who the ownership is and how we meter that supply. I'm presuming that supply isn't metered for the parish council to pick up the cost.
To be honest, let's be reasonable here.
You're going to have it taken out, Christine. You should have been quiet.
Right, here we go.
The point is going for clarity.
No, to be reasonable, we have got a how many second flash of what this speed is. Come on, it's not going to break the bank. And as far as I'm aware, I thought the county paid one big contract to Power Gen, and they're not individually priced.
I don't disagree. I absolutely don't disagree. But from my perspective, it's coming back to the point of clarity. What is our position? And our position, as far as I'm concerned, is they're not recognised DFT signs. Therefore, we don't put them forward ourselves to put in. Therefore, we negotiate the agreements with the parish councils. Whether we certainly as a highway authority therefore are responsible for ensuring that they're put in places that are safe. So we are responsible for going out and agreeing the location for them. But the maintenance agreements are all with the parish council, and the costs are therefore with the parish council. Therefore, the electricity issues are with the parish council, and therefore we wouldn't and shouldn't be hardwiring them. That's not to say that I don't keep coming across issues where an email will fly across my screen saying, oh, it's okay, the solar doesn't work, I will just get them hardwired in. And I have to stop that and say, look, there's no point in having a policy saying that we're not going to hardwire them in if every time we come across a problem we hardwire them in. And there was one on Bedlington Bank that I really had to spend an awful lot of my time discussing what the problems were, because the simple solution was to hardwire it in rather than actually spend a bit of time finding the right place for the sign. Because once they're hardwired in, it's like Christmas lights, it's like all the other things that then go on the system. It gets out of control. And so there just needs to be, back to the main point, clarity of what it is we're agreeing to put in. I'm intrigued by the range of signs that we think we wouldn't agree to. So I will look into that, and we'll try and firm up on that policy.
I mean, the signs that I got in have been put in quite a while ago before I was a councillor.
Yeah.
And I think at the time when they did get stolen, it was no one's ever stolen the solar panels off the street indicator sign. Well, they did in my ward.
Yeah.
And I think they were put there, those were needed, they were put in by the request of the previous councillor and accepted by the county. And it's not just a 30 mile, it's a 40 mile an hour, and the cars go down there at 60 sometimes. And there was been a very bad accident. I'm not sure if it was a fatality at the bottom, but there was definitely, I think, so there was a need for them at the time, and I think there's still a need for them now. But thank you for the clarity. But I think half the problem is with the town councils and not with the county.
Councillor Flux, is it on that subject?
I was just going to say, we've got a lot of points here. We used to get a book issued to us when we should or shouldn't be going to local services to report a sign was, how damaged a sign was before we came to. Surely we should have like 2 or 3 page guidance on this, so we actually understand it as councillors, because it seems to have been done on such a piecemeal basis that we come to meetings and we're discussing it here, and we'll go out this meeting and we'll remember what we've told here, but 6 weeks' time we've forgotten what we're told here. Surely we should have a 3-pager or something like that on what the rules are. That would seem to be firstly a place to start, and then secondly to look what's happened historically and why we shouldn't be making, going back or what have we. Because I mean, I'm just thinking of Cramlington. Every ward seems to have a different one. I mean, you've got your one on Dudley Lane, it just goes 30, like just one circle, doesn't seem to be. I've got mine at East Hertford, which I think I like my ones at East Hertford. I think the message is quite right. You've got yours, which are different again, and then you've got yours, which are different again. And I don't even know what we've got in East, whether we've got any. But
I'm trying to get some in East,
but no doubt you're have 6 different types, So, I mean, that's, even just in Cramlington, we've got 6 different types or whatever. It's just crazy, and I think we just need a bit of clarity. And okay, there might have been things done differently or wrong in the past or whatever. But I think we need to just, get.
Point of order, Chair, if I may add. In my ward, I think my predecessor, Alan Heppel, put 2. But both are facing in the same direction. So residents are asking me why, because, one should be the other way around. So I don't know whether it's by mistake or by design. I'm not really sure. So it is again another case for your diversity here.
Councillor Bowman, is it on the same subject? Because I'm conscious that there's other councillors who've got their hands up.
Well, I'm going to mention Seaton Valley. We've got a corporate speed awareness sign. It is the same sign throughout the whole valley. They are moved from different positions, and we, the councillors, we decide where it goes. We might have an issue on one particular road, we'll ask for it to go there. Each ward has at least, each village has one. So you've got the choice in a village where you want to put it, and it moves around. The other thing is, you used to get a smiley face, you don't anymore. That is illegal. We get a monthly report from the parish council on the various stats of that unit. The other thing is, you might think it's turned off, it's not doing anything, it's blank. It is actually working. I shouldn't be saying this in public, but it is actually working. We get the stats of that as well, and it's interesting. But the main thing is, I think we need to get this across. They do actually reduce the speed of the traffic on the road significantly, because what happens is people are driving into villages, they forget that they're supposed to slow down to 30 or 20 or whatever, and it's just a reminder. It does actually do something. Chair, can I ask a question?
I've got other councillors before you've asked a question. I'll come back to you later, but I've got other councillors who've already got their hand up, Councillor Bowman. And it's interesting that you say about these not being DFT approved. I can't help but wonder, the ones that we've got on roundabouts that are lit up, that the council gets revenue for, NCC, I wonder if they're DFT approved as well. Councillor Taylor, you had your hand up.
I've got about 3 questions for you, but just before I get on to my questions, you mentioned Bedlington Bank. It's very close to my heart. Have we got a timeline? Do we know when they're going to go in?
No, I think we're just finalising agreement with everyone that we are going to go ahead with it. And that's not to say we're not going to go ahead with it, it's just finalised agreement, get all the signs, and then we'll just instruct it.
Yes, we've paid our money over, so fingers crossed
And
sooner rather than later.
I will phone John Hall as soon as that.
Thank you very much, really appreciate it. And I know Mr Hall will as well, bless. Thank you. Right, first question I've got is, under the maintenance of footpaths, we've got a Riverside Bridle Path in the Bedlington Country Park. I'm assuming that you're looking at the Riverside Park between Attlee Park and Plessy Woods. Do you know?
I'd need to check with the countryside team details.
Yeah. Because we've got, I mean, there's 15k in for design on here. Is that a lot of money? Doesn't seem like an awful lot for a design. It's only 15k. It's not very much.
Yeah, that's to do the design and the costing work as opposed to actual delivery phase.
Yeah. So would there be money available if the design would be completed? Would there be further monies available to rebuild this path, because the path is going into the river and it's an absolute nightmare for anybody who's walking that route, and it's really well used, really well used.
What happens with this process is generally in one scheme year we'll do that detailed design work, have the consultation with the stakeholders, cost up that design, and then that scheme as a potential scheme will be considered within the 23-24 LTP process for delivery. So it won't be happening on the ground this year, but potentially it'll be happening next year if it gets prioritised as part of this process for next year.
Okay, well I'll be getting in touch with you for some repairs, because we need something done on the path, because it's a nightmare, unfortunately. Right.
If I could just clarify that everything that has a phase 1 in it falls into that bracket.
All right. Okay. Thank you. The 20 mile an hour road safety for schools. When I was part of Bedlington, West Bedlington Town Council, we asked for the 20 mile an hour signs along the Burden Terrace and then where all the schools are in Bedlington along the main road. Obviously it starts where the Red Lion is at the top and goes all the way down to the roundabout, and all the schools come off there. Would requested the 20 mile an hour speed signs, well, I think it must be 4 or 5 years now. Are we still on the list for them? Is it going ahead for Bedlington?
I'd need to check to see if that
Would
was
you?
one of the schemes that was identified as being viable or not. So I'll come back to you on
It's a
that
little
one.
bit
Yeah.
contentious, obviously, that road, because it's the main thoroughfare through Bedlington. The buses use it, but all of our schools are off that road. So we really need something put in, even if it's between like 8 and 9:30, and then again from 2 till 3:30. I think we would benefit from having all the traffic slowed down those times. So,
I'm more than happy to look into that for you.
thank you, Paul. And my last question is the cycleways. You know, you're looking at improving and developing some of them, and there's a nice little pot of money in here. Are you thinking about joining them up? Because obviously there's some in Cramlington, there's some in Bedlington, and some in Blythe, and it would be lovely for them to go all the way through Bedlington.
Ideally, yes, but the focus of those LC WIP plans is, like I say, is within those towns themselves, rather than connecting all the towns together at this stage.
Yeah.
But clearly, you know, this is a major infrastructure project to
It is.
increase cycling infrastructure across and walking infrastructure of the county. You've got to start somewhere, and the more you get within the towns, the better. And clearly, the next step on that would be trying to connect those where appropriate to do so.
Great. Well, I'll just leave that plant that little seed for Bedlington. We're right in the middle of where they've got some really great ones. And we could get all the way from Cramlington right the way to the sea. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and thank you for mentioning Cramlington again.
Well, you've got no choice.
Councillor Dunbar.
Oh, thank you. Right, this is going to be dead quick, hopefully can answer a bit at a time. Page 50. Gone, sorry. Oh, right. Page 50, the Todsted landslip. It's going to cost like 10 million to fix. What I'm concerned about is that why should the LTP have to pay nearly 2 million out of that? Because I've got some concerns about this. Because I've been doing this for a little while now. In some of these, like, there used to be more microservicing in the past, you know, and now you sort of have hardly any. And hopefully, third time lucky next year, I'll get this particular street in one of my estates microsurfaced, because it's in a really bad state, and even asking for painting, you know, refreshing the white lines would help, and that's not really happening. So first of all, regarding that, I'm concerned about the money going from the LTP into this, where it's a road that is constantly landslipping. And I want to ask, was it a Roman road at all? Because if it was a Roman road, well, you know, but if it wasn't a Roman road, maybe it should have been there, you know, if it's going to be landslipping, artesian wells and all sorts. Anyway, apart from that, I'm really pleased that there's been money put aside for the bus stop raised curbs on the High Pit Road. Now, on the east side of that road, the bit that's in my ward at Eastfield, there is no footpath on that side. But I was asked by a resident for these raised curbs on the other side where there is footpaths going along. So, will there be any on where there isn't a footpath? It's like a really ragged edge, and it's just, I just can't understand why you'd have some raised curbs on one side, you know, one side of the journey, and not getting on the way back.
I'll have a look into that.
Yeah, because I mean, and another point, I mean, I know I did ask it for my part of the High Pit Road, but the whole length of it that goes through East and South East Ward as well. And when I was doing the research on what I'd like for the LTP regarding these, there's only about 2 or 3 actually on the whole stretch, and there's a lot of bus stops that haven't got them at all. And I think because now we're sort of encouraging people to use buses and, you know, rather than using vehicles and things, I think it might be something it's needed, and especially when I think it's because of the Disability Act, where you've got to provide raised curbs for wheelchairs and such like. So I'm really pleased about that. I'm really pleased as well that there's going to be some money, 2 million put aside for footpaths and U's and C's roads. That's something I raised a while ago when I was on the cabinet for that short time, and I'm glad they've took it up. What I am concerned about, though, in South East Northumberland, there's a lot of damage to the footpaths by the roots from trees, and I have been successful getting some quite prominent roots that cause the damage, taken out in the path, changed. But I know from there's got to be a certain millimetre, and then you'll not touch them if you don't. If it doesn't reach that height. And what I found during the COVID years, when there's more people just walking around locally for an hour, I was getting approached by a number of elderly people who, one lady actually fell down. She fell and tripped on these things. So I think, is this going to be for maintenance, basically? Is this extra money going to be towards the maintenance?
The £2 million for a programme of maintenance on U&C roads and footways within urban areas, so it would include residential estate footways and things such as that as part of that.
Good. Could you look at what exactly is the millimetre?
It's 20 mil.
20 mil. So it's got to be above 20 mil.
It's basically, we have to set within the highway inspection manual what the intervention issues are in terms of what is a defect and what isn't a defect, because it comes back down to both where you spend your money and also what's actually a hazard to people in terms of the majority of the footway users. And 20 mils like a trip hazard in terms of a change in height. There are other things that you have there as well in terms of the stability of the pavement.
I really think as well sometimes you've got to have a bit more common sense about it, because in the dark when you can't, it's bad lighting, you can't get your feet right, and I've even Dolly Daydream, they tripped up a few times. It must be so difficult for older people than me, and I'm quite an age. So I'm sort of really welcome what you're doing, but I think that definitely footpaths should be a priority as well as U's and C roads. The only thing I was going to ask is, well, the micro dressing, the surface dressing, micro surfacing. Is there a reason why there's not as much as there was before, or is it because it's going to Todstead, the money?
So fundamentally, we've only got so much money, and just in terms of answering the query you had about Todsteads, we have been working on the long-term solution for the scheme for some time. So this current financial year, we've done a lot of ground investigation activity. It's best part of £750,000 spent in year doing that activity as well, just to understand what's actually happening within the site itself, so we can look at a solution to that. That we have approached DFT and the ministers to see if we could secure funding to do that. Unfortunately, the answer to that has been no. In previous years, where we've been successful in securing funding for major schemes such as the Crag End landslip that was further along that same piece of road, that was as a result of there being a DFT challenge fund call at that point in time, and because we had a scheme that was shelf ready, we were able to put that in and to secure significant external funds through DFT for that. There isn't any challenge funds, and there's a concern in relation to that road in particular that the longer we leave it, the more chance there is that something more significant happens, and then the cost of resolving that is far higher. So there has been a decision taken within the county council that we need to address this. Unfortunately, the only way we can address it is using our own funds, and in terms of just the financial arrangements internally, the view was that there had to be some contribution from the LTP towards that. Clearly, it's a lot better than it being 9.3 million out of the LTP. We only get 23 and a bit.
Well, I think
so it would have killed the whole programme if we'd done that, but there had to be some contribution, and that's the level that's been agreed.
Yeah, and I just want to also, I think from last year, I think there was some the bridges and works done down at Hartford, done a fantastic job. It's really good, and it's a really good outcome for that, because it wasn't a bit of a state and a bit of a scare at times. But I just want to thank you for when it's due. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've got Councillor Vilczek next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just concerned that the third phase of the renewal of footpaths along Stead Lane's not been mentioned. residents received the letters before Christmas. The first and second phase got carried out after the new year, and I know, well, basically then ended up not getting completed because of lack of money in the budget. I know Simon Maven in February had asked for a job to be created in the new financial year, but it doesn't seem to be listed. So can I have some reassurance on that, please?
The only reassurance I can give at this point in time is that I'll look into it and come back to you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ezel-Shelvin.
Thanks, Chair. I have a few questions. Mostly could be no. So let me 3 questions. Sorry, that's it. You know, when we had the informal meeting, David Lux was there, chaired by, and you and Richard McKenzie were there, Robin. So I raised the question of there is an estate called Collingwood Grange in southeast Cramlington, and the main road had been micro-surfaced. And I asked them whether the side roads will be micro-surfaced. At that time, Richard said, we are not really sure because the micro-surfacing, you know, is midlife treatment or something. That's the word he used exactly. So we are not really sure whether those, you know, branching off roads are really fit for micro-surfacing. So I was eagerly looking at the list of roads, small roads to be resurfaced, and these roads do not appear. So I would like to know whether they were not included because they were seen to be unfit, or is it because lack of fund, or will that be done in future? So that's because the main road was done. So but the surface, the side roads have not been done. So residents are, in all other estates, it has been, side roads have been done as well, along with the main road, but not in this estate. So I would like to know why is the reason. Is it because they are fundamentally unfit for the midlife treatment, or is it because it will come in the next cycle or whatever? So that's, so if you could update me on that sometimes, look into this one. Yeah,
I'll look into that, but I presume it was Andrew Craig that made that comment with it being a microsurfacing, as opposed to Richard. You mentioned Richard, but I presume it was Andy Craig that made the comment, so I'll chase up Andy Craig on that.
Right, oh, thank you. And the second is a kind of a minor question. You know, this coming back to speed signs, some residents are asking me for speed signs, of course, and each one costs 5,000. With 5,000 pounds, I can do lots of other things. So I would like to have, I would like the council to do give us some kind of statistics. Are they effective at all? Right? Because I talk to residents. You know, again, in the Collingwood Grange, my predecessor, Alan Heppel, put 2 speed signs facing the same direction. But I'm talking to the residents, and they said, initially, for about a month, everything was quiet. You know, people were, after that, they don't. So if I was watching those signs to go up, before you put it up, you did a traffic, you know, you put the wires across the road, and then you did some traffic statistics to see what is the fundamental. So if you could do one, if you can do one before, why can't you do one after, and then give us the information? You know, it may well be that they are effective, or they are totally useless. I mean, if it stops just by 10%, you know, 90% of the cars which went fast, still they are doing it, then probably it is very ineffective. So, you know, we from our, you know, membership schemes, who could be prudent in funding those traffic signs. So that would be very useful if you could do some survey.
The volume of requests that we get in to do traffic surveys at the moment, we're not actually in the position to be able to start reviewing some of the things, but I totally agree with you, and we should be doing some review of some of these projects that are going in. Just to give you a kind of high-level statistics, we've been doing relatively well over the last 15 years to reduce accidents across Northumberland, but predominantly more on the slight accidents, slight casualty accidents, as opposed to the serious. the vast bulk of those accidents are actually happening on unrestricted roads, so they're not actually happening across Northumberland on the 30 mile per hour, 40 mile per hour or lower type roads. And I've been doing a bit of work into this, and nationally, only about 20% of any accidents are the result of speeding. So in Northumberland,
20%.
only about 20%. Various other causes, usually things like distraction, using mobile phone, sometimes the conditions on the road, weather, ice, etc. But 20% on average is due to speeding. In Northumberland, that comes down to 10%. So only 10% of accidents across Northumberland, which are already really looking good on the slide. And the bulk of our serious accidents and fatal accidents are on unrestricted roads. So when you start analysing things to that level, and you start looking at where you want to put speed issues in, then you're kind of moving the discussion from a road safety discussion to more of a kind of environmental community type discussion. It's how people feel about the speed of vehicles in their area, as opposed to the actual speed of vehicles in the area. And in an urban setting or a residential setting, you probably notice the difference between 30 and 35 miles per hour, or 25 and 30 miles per hour, far more than you might notice out in a rural village, where you might not actually notice the difference between 30, 35 and 40 if you're in a fairly open rural village. So it's all dependent on trying to work through all those statistics, which an awful lot of people don't like to do, and come up with better policies. But we do need to at some point go back and have a look at some of these schemes and do speed surveys.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I like the answer. Thank you very much. But you know, from a safety, from environmental perspective, it makes sense. From my perspective, should I put my money in that? £10,000 is a lot of money. I mean, to put 2 speed signs, is it worthwhile cost? So if you could do some kind of before and after statistics somewhere,
Chair, if I could just say that the speed indicator signs now, the majority of the ones you can get, and the ones certainly that we would be suggesting, they do actually record the speed, and you do get statistics from those. So whilst you would get the before from our own speed survey information, you would get that ongoing feedback from the actual equipment as to the impact it had. The reason, I think, why the Council Bowman in Seaton Valley, one of the things in those locations, they've got lots of the poles that we've agreed, the locations where the poles can go, and they move those speed indicator signs around so it keeps it fresh. So you'll have them, going from one location to an empty pole onto another location, just so you address some of those issues about people, just familiarity breeds contempt issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just quickly say something just on about that? If you have a look at the Seaton Valley Council website and look at their speed report signs, I think there's 3 of them do actually tell you the speed reduction during the passing through of the sign. So it tells you the average speed reduction.
Available
yeah, so you can see if you look at the Seaton Valley website, it'll tell you on the speed report how many cars pass through it, the average speed of those cars, the V85, which is what 85% of the cars were doing that or below. Then it's also on 3 of them, it'll say, I think it's normally around between 1 and 3 miles an hour. You think that's how much the traffic slowed down on average as they've passed through that sign. So you get all of that data, and we've got months and months and months of it. But have a look on Seaton Valley Council's website at what they're getting and see whether that fits what you want.
That would be useful. Yeah.
Thank you.
One final question, actually. So again, this is again in the meeting we had. I put for an LTP priority. This was taken by integrated transport priority, which is to. So it has been selected. I was told it is there it was in the list. It is about signage to change from dual carriageway to single carriageway in A1171. So I asked for it, and it was there in the list in the meeting, circulated during the meeting we had. But whether will that be done this year? But at that time they put a small caveat: it may not get selected into the final list. So I just want some confirmation whether it has made it to the final list for the road safety integrated transport mechanism.
I think, Councillor, what you're referring to was the workshop sessions where
Yeah.
we've gone through the long list of all the schemes that came forward. Part of that process, unfortunately, is a whittling down, and if it's been whittled down and it's no longer shown on the Integrated Transport Plan Safety Programme here, it made the cut.
So it didn't make it through.
No.
A1171, okay. Can that be funded through a membership scheme if possible?
I'll have a look at that further. If someone said to you that that's in.
I have the list here, so I can leave the list with you. If you
I've just marked it up here.
yeah.
Call a conversation with it. Richard and Neil said that's in, and it could be sitting under one of the county-wide type budgets.
Yes. Okay. So I'll.
It could be, rather than named, it's
Right.
signing, so it could be sitting on.
Okay, I'll send you an email to remind you to check whether it is in or out, because, thank you. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just check, is that the one where it goes dual carriageway to single carriageway by the end of Northumbrian Road and Lancastrian Way?
Yes, yeah, that is correct. Opposite to the CLV.
Yeah, that's one that we've previously spoken about, that you said was going to be done.
That's been looked at.
And then it appeared in some different report, like squashed into some other report instead of being done. Yeah. And is being kicked into the long grass repeatedly. So,
Is that the one we've talked regularly about?
yeah, and I provided some government documentation to say why it should be done. Yeah, so.
So, Mr. McCartney,
I
you
will
know
look
what
into
I'm
that.
talking about, yes.
Okay. Councillor Bowman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just need some advice. I've got a situation, it's Park Road. It's a blind exit. The locals who use the road know that it is a blind exit, so they enter at the blind exit. They don't exit that way. I've been trying to get this into a one-way system. There's been various accidents at that junction. In fact, some years ago, an old lady died at that junction. It is a terrible sight to try to get out of. I've allocated members' funds to the design of it, and yet I don't see it in the local transport plan. And yet we're not talking about thousands. We're just talking about a one-way system. Can I have some advice on how to go forward with this one?
We'll follow it up with what's in the system. Yeah. If you've discovered, you discussed it with someone before.
I've discussed it with Neil Snowden.
I'll follow it up with Neil then.
Okay.
Councillor Ferguson, did you have anything else, or was it just in relation to that? Okay, so I've got a couple of things I want to raise myself. When we had the meeting back in November, firstly, is there any other report besides this one? I only ask that because back in November, when I asked about a few other things, I was told that would be on a separate report. So that's why I'm asking if there's another report. You know, when I was asking about double yellow lines in a certain area, etc., I was told, oh, that's on a different report. So that's why I'm asking if there's another report, because some of the stuff I asked about isn't on here. So I just want to clarify if there's another report that could be appearing on.
I recall the conversation. It's not another report, it's in another heading. So it's in that, they would be in those catch-all headings of county-wide traffic regulation orders. So it's not another report, it's just under that budget heading.
So it would be beneficial if the stuff we've requested could be listed and not under sort of miscellaneous headings. So members here don't know if what we've asked for is going to be done or not, and it leaves us very confused to say, out of the three things or whatever we've been asking for that don't appear, they might be getting done or they might not be getting done because they might be under various or miscellaneous, or they might not be because we're just going to have to wait and see. And I think we all feel the same to say, if we're asking for stuff, it seems to be well, it might be. So if it's going to be there. Can it be put down so we know it's going to be done and not hidden under a potential various heading because, well, we'll just have to wait and see how things go. If there's any money, we'll do it. If we decide we want to do it, we'll do it. But we'll just stick a various heading in there because, well, we'll have to see how the year pans out. Because that's what it seems like. Just to me, you know, I see people nodding around the room here. You know, just put pen to paper and put it down there. You know, if you've got £50,000 and you know one's going to cost 5,000, one's going to cost 10,000, then can we have it listed and detailed out? I hate various and miscellaneous headings because it covers a whole multitude of sins. And I appreciate that you don't know what's going to happen, but if we've asked for stuff, I really would like to see it listed out.
We'll take that on board. It is a presentational issue, fundamentally. I take your point. It has been a matter of expediency in terms of just not making the report just too long, but that's something that we can pick up.
I'd love to see a long report and exactly what we're going to get. And I'm sure others would as well. So yeah, I'm getting a nod to approval here. So back in November, we had the structural maintenance, surface treatments, etc. On a list, and I raised at the time that there was a few on there that weren't on there, and I'd been told, you know, would be done. For example, we had a number of surface treatments in the village, Cramlington village centre, and one, it was agreed at the time, had been missed off, and they said, yep, we haven't done that one, we've got to go back and do it, that'll get done. That was East Farm Terrace, because they couldn't just do a surface dress and they had to go back and do it. So there was, just for Cramlington, and apologies to everyone who's not from Cramlington, but I'm just looking at the Cramlington ones, there was in excess of 20 plus surface treatments. And I see on the list, which I appreciate isn't approved, it could get whittled down even more, but I see from that 20 plus, we're now showing 3. That's quite a big hatchet to chop it down that much. And it doesn't even show the ones that, or the one that I was told is going to get done, because you forgot to do it last time. So I'm a bit concerned about that. Of the LTP stuff that we did put in, I can, you know, for transport priorities, I can only see 2, which have been mentioned. So I am, you know, concerned about that as well. One of them that was put in from the town council was the improvement to traffic flow and reduce congestion around the west side of the town centre, which is Westmoreland Way, through to Station Road, Forum Way, back of Asda, that sort of thing. Now, I know discussions are already ongoing about that. There's been a few meetings. And, you know, I've been pushing to find out what's going on. But it was a request in the LTP, but nothing has come through on the LTP. So is that being dealt with separately? Is something going to be done, or is the fact that it's not in the LTP an indication that nothing's going to be done with regards to all that congestion? Hotspot here.
So I think in terms of just your comments, the difficulty we have with this process, and it is something we are going to be looking at in terms of the LTP process for future years as well, is that fundamentally the level of subscription to the scheme far outweighs the resources available to deliver it. So fundamentally, there's always going to be a lot of people, unfortunately, disappointed in terms of what we're able to deliver within the funding that's allocated to do that. We already allocate more than what the government give us in terms of that split between maintenance and the integrated transport block. We get around about 1.6 million. We're putting in over £2 million in terms of so we're actually taking money out of highway maintenance to do additional safety schemes to try and address some of those priorities and some of the aspirations within communities to improve safety and to tackle some of those, you know, improvements of cycling and walking as part of that. So, you know, that's just the nature of what it is, and that's not uncommon to other local transport authorities across the land. In terms of the work around Cramlington Town Centre, I know there has been some CCTV survey work undertaken recently around the Westmoreland Way area. That's just been analysed at this point in time. There is dialogue ongoing with Advance as the obviously the owner of the Manor Walks complex. And it's that interface between, is it Manor Walks that's creating the issues, and is it internal to them to resolve, or is it within the actual adopted highway, and that dialogue's ongoing. So I couldn't say there's been a conclusion to that. It's a work in progress at this point in time.
One of the other ones that I want to raise was a request that I put in, and I know Councillor Ezel-Shelvin's going to jump in on this one, is I've spoken to Neil Snowden in the past about sort of stabilising the speeds down Dudley Lane. Because at the moment we've got 30, 40, 60, 70, 40, 30, and just try and level them off. But my LTP request was about the unacceptable speeds down that road. And I've requested this before. This is excessive speed. And I'm not on about putting 20 mile an hour down there or anything like that, which is what I've had to explain to him in the past when he says, oh, we can't put 20 down there. I'm not asking for that. I'm on about putting something in to try and get people to stick to the speed limit. Now, as a local member, I know it's a problem. Councillor Ezel-Shelvin knows it's a problem because he's had to put up with cars coming flying off the roundabout. And I've had to, see the ones that have ended up in the central reservation opposite the high school. Local residents know it's a problem. Oddly enough, when I put that in, it was down as being the second highest number of speeding motorists in Northumberland, according to the camera van. Funnily enough, 2 weeks ago, the Chronicle ran a report of the top 20, highest speed areas in the northeast. And there's 2 in Northumberland, and we've now gone from the second highest to Dudley Lane being the highest. So, when that camouflage speed van, you can't see it because it's a big bright yellow thing in the 30 mile an hour, and no one can see it. It's actually clocking people at 73 mile an hour, and that's when the van's there. So you can only imagine what the speeds are going to be. You can only imagine what the speeds are going to be when the van's not there. I was in the entrance of the high school Sunday, and something went flying past, and I couldn't even see what the vehicle was. It was going so fast. Now, this information is in the Chronicle, and it's taken from the police. Police spokesman said, we're committed to making our roads as safe as possible for all users. So, if the residents and myself, Councillor Ezel-Shelvin and the police are aware of the problems down Dudley Lane, why aren't highways? Why can't they recognise that we've got a problem and not pick up on the LTP request and put it down as a priority to take forward?
The issue for me is because it's an enforcement issue. We're aware of the speeding on that type of road. It's an enforcement issue, trying to force people to drive within a reasonable speed limit. And so, yes, there's an issue over the changing in the speed limits. And as you've said, we're looking at trying to make it more obvious to people what speed they should be driving at. But it's predominantly an enforcement issue and discussions about how we improve that level of enforcement, because other measures in there wouldn't necessarily be appropriate.
So, Neil Snowden mentioned about new type of digital camera. Councillor Ezel-Shelvin raised with the Police and Crime Commissioner about cameras, who said quite clearly it's nothing to do with the police, it's the County Council who need to do the cameras. So, what are we going to take forward?
We're looking at a number of camera issues at the moment, and included in the LTP is an opportunity to pilot some average speed cameras on our roads, as opposed to normally major trunk roads. So we're looking at that this year.
Can I ask, and I'm going to put you on the spot, that this is going to be something looked at in the coming financial year? And I'm asking this now because we've got major parking issues around the CLV. The current parking restrictions are completely ignored, to the point where the police are having to be called because there's total gridlock. There's now been gates put at the entrance of the CLV, which mean that if those gates are closed, the only way for anything bigger than a small car to get out of that entrance is to reverse out either into the residential estate, which is a blind corner, or reverse out onto that dual carriageway. So this is a huge safety issue now.
I can confirm that there's allocations to look at an average speed camera pilot this financial year. It was more overt in an earlier draft, and it's in the system.
Okay, thanks. One more that I wanted to pick out on here was Broadlaw Business Park, microsurfacing. Now, you might recall I mentioned at the time that, sorry, I've got another one after that, that it would be potentially advisable to delay that because of an impending planning application. Yep, and yet I see that it's still down on the list. And I just think it's going to be a bit of a waste of money putting microsurfacing down on there if this planning application goes through for the development at the side of that road and all the building traffic. It just makes common sense to me why we're going to resurface it for it just to be chewed up with all the building traffic which is going on there. Because, I mean, I don't know that this is going to go through for this industrial development, but if it does, it just makes sense to maybe hold off on that and maybe allocate the money elsewhere for some of the other stuff that we've been requesting. Speaking of which, one of those that was on the original sheet was Station Road in my area, and because of that, they delayed the speed control measures pending that, and it's now not on there. So I'm assuming the speed control measures can now go ahead, because they are down for this year. And then maybe next year, if you decide to resurface Station Road, you'll take up all the speed control measures and resurface it and put them back down again.
Station Road is detailed on the other local roads maintenance schemes. It's one of the schemes for carriageway resurfacing.
What page is that on, Paul?
I've got a different version because I've not been printing lots and lots of them out, but it's on Appendix C, midway point, other local roads maintenance schemes, Cramlington, Bedlington Seaton Valley. Slow Main Place, Station Road, Cramlington Village, 160k.
Right, you're including that all in one. I saw the Low Main Place, but when it said Station Road, I didn't know that you were, I thought you were just doing that bit around the roundabout. I didn't know you were doing the whole lot. Right, appreciate it. Thanks very much. Okay.
I also did discuss with Dale this afternoon that other project, and he is monitoring the situation, but he feels it really needs done. But he is monitoring the situation with the development.
Okay. But with Dale, if you could pick up the East Farm Terrace one, which is that one bit of the village that was missed at the time, and they said they would pick it up this year, then the village is totally done. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Councillor de Shelvin, last one.
It's not a question, it's just a note of thanks. I think in the integrated transport planning, I also put in the mobilities, dropped curbs, they call it. And Richard did it before the financial year started. And everything was done. People are quite happy. And I received a handwritten note from a 90-year-old resident of mine saying that, thank you very much for the council for doing it. In fact, I took a photograph and sent it to Mr. Mackenzie as well. So it's really good. We are very pleased on all those things. And also thank you for making our Valley Park a little bit safer very quickly. Thank you very much. And thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. And I appreciate your time for the report. It is part of the local area council's terms of reference to consider and recommend adjustments. So I know you get a bit of a grilling, but that's what we're here for, to represent our residents and push for what we can. So thank you for that. Item 10, date of next meeting, which is Wednesday the 23rd of March. Just to point out that we will be in Purda for that. So just be prepared. Okay. Yeah. Item 11, any urgent business? And I have asked for somebody to attend that meeting. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions for tonight. First of all, I presume this will be the last meeting we're having here, we'll be back on the road, taking it into communities again. Given the government lifting of all restrictions, we'll be back on the road.
That's providing we can find suitable premises.
There's plenty of suitable premises, I've got no problem there. Right, right. So we'll get with Bedlington meeting. Can we insist that we'll have the update for the Bedlington development?
I've already asked.
7 years this has been going on.
I've already
Absolutely ridiculous. If it was Berwick Leisure Centre, Morpeth Leisure Centre, or somewhere like that, something would be done straight away.
I've already asked, and he said he would do it in April, and I told him that's planning,
That's for
so it
6
has
months.
to be done. So I said he'll have to do it in March. So,
Definitely March. Champion, I'll tell my residents that. Thank you.
okay, thank you everyone. I'll draw this meeting to a close.